Alright class, here are your Revelation notes, and you should use this page to fill out these notes today. So this will be a pretty brief overview of what's in the book of Revelation. It's 22 chapters, and there's a lot there. We are going to spend just a few minutes looking at some things sort of over the top of the book of Revelation. So that's what this is intended to do. This is intended to be an exhaustive list, you might say, of everything a person could know or should know about Revelation, just some of the important stuff, as we only have a little bit of time for this book in class. So first off, some basic info about the book of Revelation is that the author is John the Apostle, and he also wrote a number of other books: John, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, along with Revelation. And if you want to get really fancy, some people call these the Johannine corpus, so his body of work. So you can impress your family at dinner tonight if you want to share that. This is the Johannine corpus. The genre is called apocalyptic literature. It's probably a fairly familiar word, and that is just a word, apocalypse, that means an unveiling, a disclosure, or a revelation. In other words, making something that was unknown known. So that's why we call this apocalyptic literature. This is a vision of the battle between good and evil. So that's big picture, what Revelation is all about. And you should know that it uses a ton of symbolic language. Tons, in fact. Of the 404 verses in Revelation, 275 of those verses contain at least one reference to the Old Testament. So it is like soaked in historic biblical literature. So it's a lot of Old Testament stuff coming into the book of Revelation. With that, we are going to also say, and this is on this page, the most important thing is that the audience of the book of Revelation, so John was writing this book to a specific group of people. He was writing this to Christians who had been persecuted and who were being persecuted. And that is key. That is key of why the book looks the way it does. So it is to persecuted Christians. Make sure you know that. So here we go. What can we learn from Revelation today in 2013? What can we learn? Well, let's look at some theories, because Bible scholars disagree about when the visions in Revelation are, were, or will be fulfilled. Here are 4 of those views. One of them is called the preterist, or the preterist view. If you know Spanish, you know that the preterite tense is the past tense. And the preterists would say that John's vision, so the book of Revelation, well, what it dealt with and what it deals with today is the fall of Jerusalem, which happened AD in AD 70, or the fall of the Roman Empire in the 4th to 5th century, so that the stuff in Revelation has already happened. So preterists would say this. The second view we'll call the Futurists, and you can see what that will mean is that the vision hasn't come true yet. The vision will be fulfilled in a period of crisis just before the second coming. If you're familiar with this movie, it was a series of books and still is a series of books. That is the take that these guys have. Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins are the names of the authors, and they are futurists, that Revelation is going to come true in the future. Yet a third view is called Historicists. This is the idea that the vision in Revelation mirrors the course of church history until the second coming. And you can see that little image down there at the bottom, that chart. Historicism is being fulfilled, where preterism, which we looked at earlier, was fulfilled before 400 AD. Futurism is yet to be fulfilled. And then you see the fourth view that we'll look at there too, second from the bottom, idealism. And idealism is the idea about the book of Revelation that the vision is about spiritual warfare that is happening mostly without us knowing, that this has no historical fulfillment, that what you read about in Revelation is in another dimension, you might say, that this is happening in the spirit world and not in the world that you and I see every day. Okay, if you're thoroughly confused now, what do we take away from that? Well, the truth is probably some combination of these views. I don't think we're limited to one, that when God gives his word to us in Revelation, I don't think we're limited to one. It could be a combination. In fact, I think you can read it on multiple levels. However, I do think there's a caution to be made about number two. And remember, the view number two that we looked at earlier was that of the futurist view, that it's all going to come true. It might look a little bit, when it's taken to the extreme, like that forecast on the bottom of the screen that you're seeing right now, that we're going to start predicting when things will happen. And this has happened with Christians and with other groups that read the book of Revelation as they started to predict specific years. And Jesus says pretty clearly that no one knows the day or the hour. And I think that's true. And so be careful about the futurist view. That is one that has been particularly misused. David Koresh would be another example of that. And there's many others as well. Some very recent, in fact. So other things that we can learn from Revelation. Well, something else that Christians sometimes draw from the book of Revelation is the idea of a rapture. So what do we mean by that? Maybe you've heard it before, but rapture specifically means when Christ returns to earth. Some people believe that Christians will be lifted into the air to meet God, and for many this includes leaving non-Christians behind. Sort of the premise of the Left Behind movie in those books is this idea of a rapture. So let's take a look, because rapture is a debated topic amongst Christians. So here are some passages that some Christians have said point to a rapture. That word, rapture, is never used in Scripture. 1 Corinthians 52 says, "In a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed." Some think this points to a rapture. I'm not quite buying it. 2 Corinthians 2:2-4 says, "I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven." So you can see why this might cause some confusion. It's a confusing passage. "Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know, God knows. And I know that this man, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know, but God knows." By the way, are you confused yet? "Was caught up to paradise. He heard inexpressible things, things that the man is not permitted to tell." And it's that caught up phrase that some people think points to the idea of rapture. To me, this just is more pointing to life after death and specific rapture. But there's another one. We're going to look at 5 here. One added to your notes sheet. I think you have 4 listed there. The next one is 1 Corinthians 4, verse 17. It says, "After that, we who are alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will be with the Lord forever." If that's literal language, that's pretty close to what people think, at least what will happen with part of the rapture. Not the left behind part, but being brought up into the air. If that's figurative language, like it seems to be based on the context, I'm not so sure. Then Revelation 4, verse 1. "After this I looked, and there before me was a door standing open in heaven, and the voice I heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, 'Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this.'" Again, it can be hard to make heads or tails of the book of Revelation, but it's quite possible that this would have some really significant Old Testament ties, especially to people like Enoch and Elijah who were taken up to heaven without dying. Those are 2 people in the Old Testament where that happened. So, lastly, John 14, verse 3 says, "And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am." And I think these are comforting words from Christ, regardless of what we believe about rapture. So a question for you might be, do Christians have to believe in the rapture? And no, it's one theory among many of how the end times will happen. So this is not necessary. It's one theory. But what can we know for sure about the book of Revelation? Well, we can know for sure this, that there is and will be a battle between good and evil. God will win. And this is something that, instead of making us paranoid, should give us comfort, peace, and assurance. And if we feel convicted too, that's probably appropriate as well. But not something to make horror movies about and to lead to paranoia. But comfort, peace, assurance, and maybe some conviction too about the way that we're living. And lastly, I want to leave you with this. The canvas illustration. Some of you might know what canvas painting looks like. It's where you take paint and you layer it with acrylic paint. You layer and layer and layer. And if you look at a canvas painting up close, you might see something like this, where you can actually see the different paints. You can see mistakes. You could see brush strokes. You could see all sorts of things that you weren't meant to see, because a canvas painting is meant to be looked at from far away. So imagine that picture on the left being one part of those flowers on the right. If I would be looking up close at those flowers, I would miss the point of the beauty of the painting that's there. I would miss the overall picture. And so with the book of Revelation, I think it can be important to do the same thing. To step back and look at the big picture, rather than getting caught up in all the numbers, in the 666 number, or in the number 144,000, where numbers in Revelation are actually very symbolic. You may have noticed that when you did that assignment a while back. So these are some things I'd like you to know about Revelation, and please let me know if there's any further questions about it. Again, this is just a brief overview of a few of the things I'd like you to know about Revelation.